Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Monday morning, and that means it's time to reckon up how the weekend's reading went. I'll show you the babies. They're sound asleep on the blanket there. Uh, but since that's the first time that they've slept at all in 50 hours, I got a lot of reading done this weekend. So I wanted to go over it with you and tell you all about it, especially when we map it against the projections that I made on Friday. That's the kind of the whole purpose of this Monday morning quarter booking. So I read every one of the books that I told you about on Monday, starting with, let me see if I can get this to work, starting with the Chilbury Ladies Choir, which is a debut novel about a group of women in a small British English town whose men all go away to World War II and they're left to their own devices. As it's a small, quaint novel. It's totally enjoyable. Doesn't put a foot wrong, but it wasn't really for me. There wasn't enough that felt like it was at stake, even at the climax. Oh, there's Batman again. And then there was The Allure of Battle by Cathal Nolan, uh, which is a great big book that was bigger than it needed to be. It digressed sometimes, unfortunately, but it was really good. A really good study of just a general overall military history of humankind. I think I will be a harsher critic on it than most of it. The readers will pick it up at a bookstore because I've read every other global history of America of human warfare, and quite a few of them are better than this one. I hate to say it. Then there was The King is Dead by Susanna Lipscomb. This is a study of just the contents and the ramifications of the last will and testament of Henry VIII. You might recall on Friday's video I said that I doubted very much that it would tell me anything I didn't already know, and it didn't. And on Friday I hoped that in place of telling me things I didn't know, it would tell me things I did know in an interesting new way, and it mostly didn't do that either. So this is more for a reader who isn't me. This is more for someone who maybe knows less about Tudor history and the details of Tudor legal history. And then there was this, Lawrence Bergreen's big new biography of Casanova, and it was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I've said on this channel many times before, when biographies or histories come up like this in a certain vein on this kind of thing, this is the kind of book that has as its competition for your attention the book written by its subject. There's a new book about a young Winston Churchill, but a young Winston Churchill also wrote a book about himself at that age, and it's a humdinger of a book. There's a new book about well, the example that I gave at the time was River of Doubt, which was about Theodore Roosevelt's adventures in the jungle after he was president. Anybody who writes a book on that subject has to compete not only with any other book on that subject, but on Roosevelt's own book on that subject, which is fantastic. Same thing is true here, because anybody who writes a biography of Casanova has to contend with Casanova's own account of his life, which is incredibly good. Just endlessly readable, and it's gigantic too. It's a whole bookshelf, so it's as a reading project, it's well worth your time to do. But this does it. This is a perfect complement to that. By far the best Casanova biography I've ever read. I will be, I hope, reviewing it for somebody somewhere. And then we had The House of the Dead, which is a history of the political exiles to Siberia under the Tsars, and it was harrowing. It's extremely good, and just harrowing. Just the idea of these wagon trains of people dressed in shirt sleeves and manacles being taken to the bittermost end of the world and dropped off in the middle of nowhere in the middle of a blizzard with no implements, no clothing, no shelter, no nothing, no food, no means of getting food, and told, build a prison. We expect regular progress reports when you get here. You're going to die in about 2 hours. It's hundreds of them. It's the author doesn't make enough of the presentiments of his subject for Stalinist times, he could have made a lot more on that subject, but even so, what a book. Uh, and then there was Earning the Rockies by Robert Kaplan, which is subtitled How Geography Shapes America's Role in the World. Uh, it's very lively written. I was never tempted to put it down, but it doesn't really make its case. It doesn't. How geography shapes America's role in the world didn't really land for me while I was reading this. I learned a lot, but I don't know. In the pitiless terminology of book reviewers, I would probably call this a misfire. And then there was one extra thing, one extra ebook that I got, e-galley, and that was this, Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders, a novel, a historical novel by our greatest living short story author, which it's his very first novel, and it seems weird to say that about George Saunders because his writing has been in our eye for a long time and always esteemed, and rightfully so. So you don't picture a first novel with someone who's such a practiced wordsmith, and amazingly, despite that, the book has some first novel problems. Apparently, that's just endemic to the genre and has nothing to do with the experience of the writer. I don't think I will review this. I don't think I want to review it. But I will very much. It's going to be reviewed everywhere, literally everywhere. Your local county shopping circular will have a review of this thing, and I look forward to reading. This will be one of those ones where I collect the reviews and study them as much as I study the book to find out how this is working on the foremost. All the foremost fiction critics in the country will do it, and I want to see what their consensus is. But there were a lot of other books because there was no sleeping and no resting. And one of the things I got in the mail, I don't think it was in the mail shipment that I opened on camera. I'm scolded regularly by quite a few of you about the fact that there should never be any mail shipments that I don't open on camera. But I can't help but wonder if that gets a little tedious. Anyway, one of the ones that I don't think I showed on camera, Pelican is reprinting all of their old Shakespeare volumes with newly commissioned cover artwork. This brutalist, minimalist cover artwork. The books themselves are not new, aside from the cover art. These are the exact same Pelican Shakespeares that have been around for 80 years. But this one is Othello, and I got it in the mail, and it's a nice, handy size. I very much like this whole edition run that they're doing. So I made a big mistake. I reread Othello. Well, it's not part of my plan. But I did it anyway because Shakespeare is life's blood to me. And that led me to the bookshelf, to this, the Norton Critical Othello, and all of the essays. This is mostly essay. And I just decided to reread them all, sift through their notes. And that led me to this, an older book called The Case Book on Othello. That is also, you get the play and then a collection of essays, only a couple of which overlap even a little with the essays in here. So I ended up, for the course of a whole afternoon, on a gigantic Othello digression that I didn't see coming. And then I wanted to show you three other things that also fit the theme that I read this weekend. It's pretty much all that I read this weekend. And the theme is historical fiction, which some of you know I'm a big fan of historical fiction. And Ron Hansen's new book is called The Kid. I think we saw an ARC of this on this channel. It's a historical novel about Billy the Kid, who's been done up in historical fiction quite often, including by Gore Vidal. And this is really, really good. It's I think almost certainly my favorite book by him, and deserves a wide audience. I highly recommend it when it comes out. And then there were two other historical novels, and unlike The Kid by Ron Hansen, these are self-published novels. You are not going to see them in bookstores, but I highly recommend them. You should go and find them if they interest you. First is this one, The Boy Who Wanted Wings. This is by James Conroy Martin, and it's set in 17th century Ottoman Empire in Vienna. Some of you remember a once beloved children's classic called The Trumpeter of Krakow. This is very similar in some ways to that. Let's see here. While the Ottoman Empire stands poised to overrun all of Europe at Vienna in 1683, young Alexei, a Tatar peasant and expert archer, nurtures dreams of becoming a hussar, one of the elite Polish winged horsemen, and of pursuing the beautiful Countess Christina, both impossible quests. One day he must choose which dream to pursue. Now, this is just propulsively good. Just a fantastic historical novel. And, a perfect example of what I say all the time. I've mentioned on this channel before that I am the U.S. and worldwide editor for the Historical Novel Reviews Indie branch. It's self-published branch. That's historical fiction that is self-published or subsidy published. And so I read a great deal of it. And it always strikes, books like this, I mean, most of what I read in under that umbrella is as bad as you might think. Most of it is people who just want to write, but they don't want to be authors. They're not willing to hire cover artists. They're not willing to hire professional editors. They're not willing to pay extra for better formatting. And so their books get to me looking just like what they are, self-published vanity projects. But more and more of the books I get are like this. The only reason that something this good isn't stacked right alongside this on your Barnes & Noble front fiction table is because this author, for whatever reason, wasn't willing to go through the unbelievably stupid rigmarole that mainstream publishing demands of its supplicants. You have to find an agent. The agent is free to edit your book like God Almighty. Once that's done and you hardly recognize the end result, you have to submit it to a publisher. They also are free to edit it like God Almighty. They expect you to get in your car and do all of your own roadside publicity. They don't pay for anything unless you're, a superstar YA author. And they get a cut, and everybody else gets a cut. And if you're willing to go through all that, if you're willing to go through the Byzantine prostrations that are necessary to crawl on your face to get their attention and to get their approval, then your book will get onto a Barnes & Noble front table. More and more self-published authors who know they have the goods are simply avoiding that process completely and doing something like this. The only problem being that you won't see it at random at a bookstore. You'll have to go elsewhere for it. You'll have to get it recommended to you. You'll have to hope that they are as savvy playing the internet game as they are, writing books. And that doesn't always work. So I figure they need any advocacy they can get. So by all means, look this up. And if you like it, the more you read about it, spend the money to buy it and benefit the author. And the second one, even more so. Oh my God. This is called The Memory Palace of Giuseppe Arcimboldo. And this is set in 16th century Prague. And is an incredibly good, detailed, present tense, propulsive admixture of fantasy and history and biography. It's just it's just incredible. It reads from start to finish like something that Umberto Eco on the top of his game would have written. I highly recommend it. So I obviously don't have the time to talk about any of these things in detail, but for these two, The Boy Who Wanted Wings and The Memory Palace of Giuseppe Arcimboldo, by all means, feel free to look them up, and if you like the look of them, buy them from the author. Make sure the author knows that he has your money, that he has your sale, because authors like this should be encouraged. Not just because models that undercut the traditional model, which has grown bloated and tyrannical, need to be encouraged, but also because authors themselves need to be encouraged. Authors of books this good are worth your patronage. And there you go. That is our Monday morning quarter booking for today. That was the shambles that was made in my weekend's reading, which I'm not unhappy about. I could really use a nap, and that's what I think I might go do. Even though the sun is up and the day is on, I might do it anyway, just so I don't see double or hear ringing or walk into traffic. But once I've recuperated, I'll see you again, BookTube. Thank you.